Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I'm Ryan, and today I'll be talking about the book Fatherhood by Augustine Sedgewick. This is a history of love and power. It was not what I expected. I liked it. I gave it 4 stars, but it was different, and I'll explain. I thought this was going to be a book that really just talked about how the role of fathers has changed over the years, and it did that, and I think that was kind of the intent. But the way it did it was it looked at specific individuals over the years, and the individuals were Plato and Aristotle, St. Augustine of Hippo, Henry VIII, Thomas Jefferson, Emerson and Thoreau, Charles Darwin, Sigmund Freud, and Bob Dylan. And then Men After Fatherhood was the concluding chapter. One of my favorite chapters was probably the conclusion. So early on in the book, chapter 1, Plato and Aristotle, Augustine, maybe even Henry VIII, I felt like he talked about how the understanding of the role of men in families, specifically with children, fathers, had changed over the years, from like Neolithic cavemen who were just out like impregnating people and then going out and doing stuff, to more modern ideas of the role of man. This also goes into the patriarchy, and would probably be an interesting book for a feminist. So I saw early on how the role of fathers was being described and how it was changing over the years, and how males, as the leaders of their families, took on more and more responsibility, but power, and that not necessarily a zero sum, but it meant that women were also losing some of that authority, some of that power over their lives or their children's lives. Also following what line does kind of the rights to property follow? Is it the mother or fathers? Who determines the legitimacy of a child? How are these rules in the house also reflected in the rules of society at large? So we're looking at Greece, we look at Rome, we look at Europe, England, and the United States, and we just kind of see this progression of, maybe it's not totally a progression, different periods. I mean, there were some obviously major changes from BC times to now, and our role as fathers would be different 3,000 years ago, but there's also different amounts of involvement from fathers in families, and the kind of the burdens they carry. It's hard to go back and discuss this. Here's what I liked, and I think this is separate from the purpose of the book, was I liked each chapter being about a different person. And he's talking about fathers, but they're not necessarily good fathers. And he's talking about the role of the father, and how God is seen, and how Jesus is seen, and how the men of the household are seen, and how different wars have changed that, and different expectations of maintaining property or life expectancy or the number of children you have, even the approach to marriage. Those have all helped, I think, shape what fatherhood is. I think, one of the things that he talks about at the end of this is that some people push back on it. Some people think, oh, fatherhood now has made people softer. And it's really this fight that people have to go back to something that has already changed. It's gone. It's gone, and there's no bringing that back. So it's kind of people that can't adapt to the here and the now. I do think that fathers are more involved now. My wife does more than I do in the house. That is true. And that is generally true everywhere now. But my role is more involved than it would have been 70 years ago. And I have a good dad and a good mom, and I try to be a good dad. I think every parent is able to pick out things they're not good at, and they worry about how their shortcomings affect their children in the long term. And I am no different than that. But I have a really good kid and a good wife, and I try to be good. I try to be a good dad, and a lot of that for me is giving her opportunities to learn and like learning and fail, but I don't like seeing her fail. But I think failure is, part of learning. I work, but I also play with her, Noelia, my daughter. Before school started, she said, "You work all the time. I want to have a weekend with you." And we did. We had a weekend, but it was also like, in the back of my mind, I was thinking about the Cats in the Cradle song. And I was like, am I doing that? And I don't think I am. I think I'm more available than the dad in that song. But maybe I'll use that song for this video. You'll see. If I did, this is the moment where I decided to. So I like the stories in this book about the individuals. I felt like in the middle of it, the connection to the fatherhood changes was a little more stretched. It was harder to see than it was in the beginning. I think it ended the right way and was more of the here and the now, and especially I think Augustine Sedgewick's kind of point of view as a father. Yeah, so I liked it. 4 stars. I think we should talk more about dads. I mean, there were at one point that's all of parental descriptions and how to raise your children was geared towards the fathers, and property went through the males, and the father could determine if the kid was his or not by claiming him or renouncing him. Even the way they determine kids that were born, if they didn't know who the dad was. I mean, now you can definitely know. So there's not kind of that little bit of protective approaches to determining if you're the father or not. Now you can find out if you are. But I felt like the beginning and the end, especially, where you could feel where he was going, and in the middle, still interesting stories, but I felt like a little of that was lost. There was just more of the stories than the application to fatherhood. It was there. I mean, there was something there. It just wasn't as direct or as obvious as some of the earlier stuff. But I think it's interesting. Even if it didn't go where I thought it was going to go, it still went somewhere that I thought was interesting. And I don't know if there's another book out there that would be like this. Oh, there's Sammy. I'm her dad, too. Yeah. So that's it. Thanks for being here today. Sammy, thanks for coming. Thank you for coming, Sammy. What are you doing? Yeah. Have a good one. Bye.
A child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away, and he was talking for I knew it. And as he grew, he'd say, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. You know I'm gonna be like you. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon,